They threw her baby in the dirt, and the sound of the infant's cry pierced through the dusty air like a blade cutting through silence, a sound so small and fragile yet so powerful that it made the whole crowd flinch for a heartbeat, but not enough for them to stop their cruelty, because in that town, mercy had long been buried beneath years of bitterness, shame, and the poison of gossip. The young mother, her dress torn, hair tangled, and face streaked with tears, stumbled forward with trembling hands, her body instinctively lunging toward the tiny bundle that had been tossed down like trash, but before she could reach him, a heavy boot pushed her back, and jeering voices rose, mocking her weakness, mocking her worth, mocking the child who had no sin except being born to the wrong woman at the wrong time. And in that cruel moment when hope seemed to shrivel, a voice cut through the noise, deep and steady like thunder rolling across an empty plain, the voice of a man who had watched long enough, who had felt his jaw clench and his fists tighten with every insult thrown, and now he could not stand still. The rancher, broad-shouldered, his hat low against the setting sun, pushed through the crowd with steps that made even the boldest of men shift aside, his hand going straight to the dirt where the baby wailed, lifting the child with a gentleness that was almost startling given the power in his arms, brushing dust off the infant's tiny face, holding him close as if he had always belonged there. And when the mother gasped, her heart torn between gratitude and disbelief, he turned his steel-blue eyes toward the men who had spat on her name and declared, "Both are mine now," his voice echoing like a hammer striking iron, a vow, a challenge, and a promise all in one. Silence swept the crowd, for everyone knew this was not a man whose word could be tested lightly, a rancher who worked the hardest land, who carved out his life with calloused hands, who had stared down wild storms and wolves and never faltered, a man who stood alone because he needed no one, yet in that moment he chose to stand with a woman and her child, and the weight of that choice pressed against every sneer, every whisper, until those who had mocked now lowered their eyes. But the story did not end there, for the mother, broken and trembling, could barely believe she was being shielded, could barely believe someone would claim her, not with shame, not with disgust, but with strength. And as he held her child, she realized for the first time in her weary life that maybe she wasn't alone anymore, maybe there was still a chance to rebuild, to rise, to live. And when he extended his hand to her, rough and scarred from years of work but steady and unwavering, she placed her smaller hand in his, knowing it was not weakness to lean on someone who had already chosen to carry her burdens as his own. Together, they walked through the crowd, not hurried, not hiding, but straight-backed and
unafraid, and took the whisper followed. The rancher never once looked back, for his only concern was the woman clutching his arm and the child now resting safely against his chest. And that night, in the key of his ranch house, by the warmth of a fire that softened the shadow, he lay the baby in a cradle he had built with his own years ago, never knowing why he kept it after loss had once hollowed his life. And he told her gently that family isn't always blood, sometimes it's the choice to love when no one else will, sometimes it's a decision to stand up when the world throws someone down. And in her tears she saw no pity but promise, no charity but strength, and she whispered a thank you that carried more weight than a thousand speech, because it was the sound of a soul being lifted. And so, under the endless sky, the rancher kept his vow, raising both the child and the woman I own, facing a very storm, a very cruel whisper, a very trial with the unshakable strength of a man who had claimed them not out of obligation but out of love. And as the seasons turned, the townsfolk who once mocked were silenced not by word but by proof, for they saw a family forged in fire, unbreakable, and they learned that true strength is not in cruelty or mockery but in choosing to protect the fragile, in standing for what is right even when standing alone. And that legacy grew, echoing in the land, teaching anyone who would listen that sometime, one man's vow can change everything. So dear listener, if this story touched your heart, if you believe in strength, redemption, and love that rises even from the dust, then join us here where such tales live on. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next story that might just change the way you see the world. The town did not forget that day, for word of what the rancher had done spread faster than wildfire in summer grass, and took some whispered that he had lost his mind, claiming a woman and her child that weren't his. other spoke with a key respect, for there was something unshakable about the way he had stood before the crowd and declared ownership not of land, not of cattle, but of lives that everyone else had thrown away. And in the weeks that followed, the young mother found herself living in a world she did not understand, a place of white sky and hard work, where the rancher rose before dawn and moved through his day like a man whose purpose was carved deep into his bones, and took she was timid at first, afraid of making a mistake, afraid of being a burden, he never once treated her with impatience, never once reminded her of a shame other had said to her name. Instead, he gave her small species of dignity, teaching her how to feed the horse, how to carry water, how to stand tall even when her arm trembled, and she watched him cradle her child after long days, humming low tune that carried across the wooden walls of the house. She began to
believe that maybe his vow had been more than just words spoken in a moment of heat. Maybe he truly meant for both her and the baby to belong in his life forever. Yet the world outside their ranch did not stay silent, for men who had once mocked her now gathered in dark corners of the saloon, angry that she had not been driven away, muttering that the rancher was setting a dangerous example by challenging their cruelty, because if one man could defy the town's scorn, others might too, and that threatened the power of those who thrived on fear. And so it was that trouble began to brew, though the young mother did not know it, busy as she was learning to live without flinching at every shadow, her heart slowly healing in the safety of the rancher's quiet strength. One evening as the sun bled red across the horizon, she stood on the porch with the baby in her arms, watching him return from the fields, his shirt damp with sweat, his hands dark with earth, and for the first time she felt something stir that frightened her even more than the hate of the town, hope, a fragile, trembling hope that she could begin again, that maybe she was worth loving after all. And when he walked past her with a nod and a small smile, she whispered into the baby's soft hair that perhaps they had found their place at last. But hope is always tested, and the test came one night when 3 men rode up, their horses restless, their voices loud, demanding that the woman come out, saying the rancher had no right to keep what wasn't his. And though her heart leapt in terror, the rancher stepped out into the dark with nothing but the lantern's glow on his face, his stance calm yet unyielding, and he told them that what was his could not be stolen, that no man had the power to undo the vow he had made. And when one of them spat in the dust and reached for his gun, the rancher's hand moved with the swiftness of storms, drawing his weapon not to kill but to fire into the air, the sound cracking like thunder and sending the horses into a panic, scattering the men back into the night, their curses swallowed by distance. Afterward, he returned to the porch where she stood pale and trembling, and without words he placed his hand on hers, steady and firm, and in that silence she knew beyond doubt that he would face down the world for her and her child, not once but as many times as it took. And tears slid down her cheeks as she realized that belonging was not given by a town, it was given by love, by loyalty, by courage, and the rancher had given them all of these freely. From that day on, the town watched with wary eyes, some still bitter, others slowly moved by the proof of his devotion, and the mother, once cast aside, walked a little taller each morning, knowing that though scars of the past would take time to heal, she no longer walked alone, for her child had a father in every way that mattered, and she had a man who saw her not as a mistake but as a woman worth standing for, and